This is the last stop on the Holocaust part of the trip, and we thought it was very fitting to make this the last remnant of the Holocaust we're going to be looking at here in the Czech Republic, just outside Prague. And we are still in the Terezin ghetto, Terezinstadt as it's also called. And what's behind us is a very special room. It's small, and when I finish speaking you can go in to check it out. But the message that this room behind me sends, I think, is a very important one for us to leave the Holocaust part of our journey. There was a Jew who fought for Germany from a city called Würzburg. His name was Asher Berlinger, and after war, after fighting, he became a cantor, chazan. He was a very observant and devout Jew. He was also a music teacher and a teacher of children as well as being an artist. And he also wrote his own liturgy as well. So very, very talented man. He married a woman called Berta. They had two daughters, Rosie and Senta. He was sent to the Dachau concentration camp, but this was right at the beginning, or even before the war formally began, and he was released because of his service to the country, at least temporarily. At this point, he knew something was up, and he sent his two daughters to England, where they escaped to. And as you know, England wasn't, thank God, actually taken over by the Nazis. It was attacked many, many times by the Luftwaffe, but it was not actually taken over by the Nazis. And eventually Arta was brought here to Terezinstadt, which we all know was basically a big PR exercise on behalf of the Nazis to make sure that they at least will be seen by the world as being a humane bunch. This is him. This was actually a picture of him which was taken before the Holocaust. He lived here, his wife and himself, his wife Berta and himself, in a separate part of the ghetto, and basically you're standing in a big prison. That's basically what Terezin was. However, there was certain laxity that came with the Terezin camp, and eventually he found this small storeroom, and he decided that he wanted to make it into a prayer room. And it's interesting that he did such a thing, because there's many things he could have done. He could have just prayed by himself in his room, which would not have been dangerous or endangered him in any way. He could have just found this room and closed the door for no one else to let people through, to actually see what was happening. However, what he decided to do instead was to make it into a public prayer room. And we know that he had some kind of freedom, that he was able to have utensils and paint to actually paint. And he actually decorated this room, and you'll see in a few moments, there are words on the walls, there are candles, stars of David, and this became a very special place in the camp where people would come and they would pray in this room and they would meditate and they would find, it is told, some kind of comfort in the difficulty that was the Terezin camp. And what's amazing is that he lost his two daughters. As far as he knew, he was going to see them again. He didn't know what was going to happen to them. He was allowed to send a little bit of correspondence that the Red Cross allowed to enter in and out of Terezin. So his daughters were able to keep up with him up to a certain point. But as you know, eventually, at the end of the war, all the Jews in here pretty much were sent out to the death camps and were killed. In 2002, his daughters came to visit, not knowing this room existed, walked in, were shown the room, looking at the writing on the wall and the art that was drawn. They realized this was the art of their father, and it was actually proven that this was actually a room their father had created, and there's other paintings and drawings that he had made as well. And later on, they made a ceremony. Those paintings were presented to the daughters. What's incredible is that we spoke, and you hear a lot about forms of resistance. I'm sure you may have seen the movie Defiance, for example. There was a physical resistance that came with the war. In most cases, it was not successful. But I want to talk to you for just a moment about another form of resistance. And that is what I believe to be an even stronger form of resistance, and that is spiritual resistance. And we are fortunate to have with us Label Zisman, who himself brought tefillin into Birkenau and was able to put tefillin on his entire time there and give it to other people. That's a very good example of spiritual resistance. There's another famous story of a very famous Rebbe called the Berlinger Rebbe. And the Berlinger Rebbe was also in camps. And he tells a story which was given to an authoress called Yafa Eliach, written in a great book, well worth reading, called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. And he writes there that there was a time when he wanted to eat matzah during the Holocaust. Imagine that. Passover's coming, your family's being killed, starvation around you, and he still wanted to drag bits of flour together, pieces, so that he could bake matzah for Passover. And he tells a story of a small amount of matzah he managed to make, and there was a discussion as to who would get to eat and do this mitzvah of eating the matzah on Pesach, on Passover. And he tells a story of how he wanted to give it to the older people, the people who had the obligation, those who were post bar mitzvah, so they could eat the matzah maybe for the last time in their lives. But he tells a story of a woman who was in the camp, and she resisted, and she told the Berlinger Rebbe that this was not the right thing to do. There are children in the camp. And he said, why would I want to give matzah to children? They're not obligated in mitzvah. They're not bar mitzvah. Give it to the people who do have the obligation. And she said, these children don't have something the older people do have. The older people have tasted matzah and have fulfilled this mitzvah of matzah and had the taste of matzah on their lips. But these small children, we don't know if they're going to be here by next Passover. Let them taste some of the matzah. And he agreed, and he decided to give the children the taste of the matzah that particular Passover. He managed to survive the war, and he ended up, after losing his family from before the war, marrying this woman who gave him the matzah advice after the war. Spiritual resistance and the power it can bring a person in the most difficult, challenging, and dark circumstances. And then we have the synagogue. A synagogue that's found in the middle of a ghetto of lies. This is the ultimate sheker, non-truthfulness that can exist. The Nazis made it into a propaganda piece, and you live inside a propaganda piece. The films are beautiful, they make of you, but the artwork, as you may have seen, shows the desperation and the torture and the hunger. And here, Arthur Berlinger built a synagogue to give comfort to those around him. And there's actually a self-portrait of himself as well, which you want to see, I have it here as well, of himself praying in the corner. And the verses he picked on the walls were very, very telling. On the right-hand side, as you walk in, you'll see a very famous verse, which you'll see on most synagogues around the world. Da lifnei mi'ata omed. Know before whom you stand. And that's obviously a message to the people in the prayer rooms, in the synagogues around the world, but as well here, in the most darkest of places, he would be telling the people, know that even in the terrible place that we're in, there's someone, God, who is above us and watching us. And that you'll see in the place of where the Chazan stands. You'll see also to the right, may Hashem, may our eyes be able to see the return to Zion in compassion. The constant desire to get back to the land of Israel. And then a very powerful verse we say in Tachanun, one of the prayers of repentance. Ana, please God, shuv mecharonecha. Turn back from your anger, v'rachem segula asher b'charta, and have mercy upon the treasured nation that you chose. And finally, and most telling, you'll see as you walk straight and facing you, uv'chol zot, and through all of this, shemecha lo shechachnu, we have not forgotten your name, God, na al tashchenu, so don't forget us. And that was the message which Arthur decided to give the people who were coming to his small synagogue here in Terezin camp. And what a powerful message that hopefully we'll take with us, that although there was death and destruction, and they hurt the bodies, and they broke the bodies, and they killed the bodies, and they burned the bodies, but one thing they couldn't do was take the Jewish spirit. That, the soul of the Jew, is something which the Nazis cannot take, and no one can take from any of us, because that is eternal, it's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God, and that level of humanity and connection they were still able to keep, even in the disgusting place that is Terezin. So I ask you all, you can go in, you can look at the paintings, the original paintings you're seeing over here, on the walls, on the originals. The bottom, there was a flood a number of years ago, so the bottom section wiped away, but you get a flavor and a touch of the artwork as you go in. So we do it 10 at a time, and we'll stop over there.